This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. We return to the theme of mental health and trauma regularly here on Transqat, and I'm sure if you're listening to this show, you're well aware of the statistics for queer folks and especially trans and non-binary folks. We are at much greater risk of anxiety, depression, suicidality, substance abuse, trauma, and eating disorders. It ties in with something called minority stress syndrome. If you live in a society that systematically tries to oppress or even eradicate you, well, obviously your mental health risks are higher. Fox and Feather Healing Arts Services uses art therapy to help female-identifying clients and the queer community heal and lead more joyful lives. Sarah Guercia, who's the founder and owner of Fox and Feather, and I have been discussing for some time now doing an episode about their work, and I am so grateful that she and Rachel and Katie were able to sit down and talk about what they do.
Sarah, I don't want to alarm you, but there's a larger than usual fox behind you. Don't turn around. Don't turn around. But there's a really big fox right behind you.
Yes, I'm familiar with her. We're quite friendly. She lives in the office with me.
Does she have a name?
She doesn't. Foxes appear quite often in my artwork, which perhaps we'll talk a bit more about. But she started taking shape in COVID. And so as I'm doing my work, this is my home office, my healing work with clients, I will listen to her, see what she's asking for, add a couple layers of paint, and then come back to being a therapist. So she doesn't have a name. I'll have to listen.
So she's an ongoing sort of project.
Yes. In art therapy, we call those process paintings. I'm Sarah Guercia. I am the founder and owner of Fox and Feather Healing Arts Services here in Guilford, Connecticut. I'm an art therapist, a licensed professional counselor, and I'm also a soul collage facilitator, which maybe we'll chat about.
I'm Katie Highland. I'm the assistant director and clinical supervisor and an adult clinician at Fox and Feather. I joined in 2020, just after the start of COVID, started my outpatient journey.
Hi, my name is Rachel Kerner, and I'm an art therapist and lead adolescent clinician and marketing director here at Fox and Feather. I think it's been around like 3 or 4 years since being here. I started part-time and now, I'm fully here, and, it's exciting to be a part of this practice.
So how long has Fox and Feather been a going concern?
So I started the practice in 2017 when I was on maternity leave with my first son. I was working for an agency, which is actually how we all know each other. Katie was one of my interns that I supervised. So this is going back almost 10 years now. And my husband and I found out that we were pregnant, which was a little earlier than anticipated. And a few days later, results of the 2016 election were announced. So I knew then that I needed to make a different reality, not just for myself. I knew as a mother, a new mother, I did not want to be working 40, 50 hours a week in an agency setting. And I also knew that folks were going to need a safe place for healing. I knew that it was something that I could build. So that's what I did when I was on maternity leave. I had one client, I opened the practice, and since 2017, we have grown to an incredible team of 8, and we serve about 100 clients now.
When you said 2017, it took me aback a little that's almost a decade, isn't it? It feels like a couple of months ago, but it's
been a blur.
Yeah, COVID will do that to you. So let's talk a little bit about healing arts. This sounds like it's more specific, more involved. I'm not sure what the right adjective is than just therapy.
Sure. So I can start to answer this question, and then I would love for Katie and Rachel to add their spin on what they consider art therapy to be and how they use this tool. At Fox and Feather, so we are a team of, we have 7 art therapists on staff and our wonderful office manager. And so we're all trained in talk therapy and in art therapy. And what I have found, which I think most people can relate to, is we move through life and we have these experiences that are truly beyond words. And that could be positive or negative. I don't know that I could put into words what holding my first child was like, or being a trauma survivor. And I feel that I can express on a much deeper level those human experiences through my art making. So I think of it as another language that we can all speak. And as art therapists, it's our job to help clients interpret this new language that they're speaking. So you don't need any art experience whatsoever. Everybody can be creative. And we as art therapists will nurture this new language, or maybe it's a familiar language, but we will nurture this creative language and then help our clients process the piece of art that they've just made, which is full of so much wisdom. So that's how I think of art therapy. And Katie, I'm sure you've got some other thoughts too.
Yeah, I think that when I think of the name healing arts, I think in the broadest sense, right, those are practices that promote healing, and that is what we do with our clients is we want to promote healing. And for me specifically, that's through a process of creativity. I've always considered myself a creative person, an artist, and I like to bring that out with my clients and give them the confidence that they need to be able to express themselves, like Sarah said, in a new language, a different language, maybe a returning language that they left behind. And it allows them to go on this journey, on this process of healing, reconnecting with themselves. And that really is the kind of the beauty of it, is that the process is the healing.
And to add to that, because that's a really great definition of art therapy in the process. But I also see it too as almost like dreaming while awake while making art. Like it feels like we're allowed to kind of be more in that free state to express. And, like the client and myself, we become these like co-witnesses to the art. The art can hold space for something that feels too heavy or like complex to say in that moment. Especially with working with adolescents, there's a lot of exploring, a lot of different layers and transitions coming up that it is really hard to put into words. And
well, you said dreams. As you say that, it occurs to me that my dreams are almost never verbal, and I am a profoundly verbal person. I'm a language teacher. I'm a classicist. I organize my existence around my management of words. But my dreams are never like that. They're feelings, they're sensations, they're images. And so if you wanted to process things that are going on at a subconscious level, that makes perfect sense to me.
Absolutely.
So I have a long history of anxiety and depression. If I were to come to you and just say, that the world is a mess, I'm feeling incredibly stressed out, what would that look like? How would we proceed?
One thing I want to note is that we have lots of experience working with clients with anxiety and depression. Grieving is another specialty. And particularly what we specialize in is eating disorder recovery services and sexual abuse recovery services. And of course, those things really go hand in hand. And so let's use that as an example, Claire. Let's say you've heard this podcast or you've come across our website and you're really interested.
What's the name of this podcast? I'm sorry to interrupt, Sarah, but what's the name of this podcast again? What are we?
Transqat podcast.
Oh yeah.
So you would give us a call, and the first person that you would talk with would be Abby, who is our admissions director. And Abby completes a really brief, we call it a phone intake. And so that serves a purpose, two purposes really. One is for the potential client to share their story and for Abby to gather enough information to determine, are we the right practice for you? Can we serve you in the way that you're looking for? If the answer is yes, then Abby will talk about our clinicians that have openings and get you scheduled. And if not, we will always provide referrals. Maybe there's a different specialty or somebody else in the area that would be a better match. We would make sure you have that referral. And then you come in for your first appointment with your clinician. And the way that I lead those sessions, and Katie and Rachel probably have some thoughts too, is I will essentially say, tell me your story and start wherever feels like the beginning. One of the things that I think is so beautiful about therapy and about art therapy is this opportunity to share your narrative. And it's a really interesting process when you sit down with someone, essentially a stranger, your brand new therapist, and you're condensing a lifetime of experiences into this 55-minute story for your initial appointment. And we may or may not make art in that first appointment. Usually I don't, because there's a lot of information gathering. And then from there, each session looks very different. Every session with every client looks different. Sometimes we're making intuitive art. Sometimes we're making more direct art. Sometimes we're working on one piece of art for months and months and months and seeing how it evolves. That's the process painting that I was referring to. But it's really what I love about this team. There's so many things that I love about this team is each of us have this incredible ability to deeply listen to the here and now so that we can offer some sort of creative directive, an art directive to meet you right where you are, to support you in a way that we feel is most necessary for that moment.
Yeah, similar to Sarah in a first session, I don't phrase it quite as a narrative, but I do like that. I usually go with like a timeline analogy, right? Like I want to hear the timeline of your life. Start wherever you feel like is the most important, and we'll go through and we will get to what we get to, and no pressure to finish. And like Sarah said, there is a magic to sitting down with a person and just hearing their story from them as they have lived it, as they have felt it. And it really is kind of a special honor to be the person that they share that with in a first meeting.
This is a weird analogy, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder has a passage where he talks about the fact that everything in nature except for us is born with protections, right? So a tree is born with bark, and animals have scales or wings or claws or teeth where it can defend itself. And we are the only critter, he argues, that are just born naked and vulnerable. And I have always taken that to be the reason why we as humans are the storytelling animal. That's what we do. That's our defense in a world that doesn't make sense and where most of the things coming at you want to harm you. We take that and we turn it into stories. Mm-hmm. And so to start my relationship with Katie, with Rachel, with Sarah, as I walk in that first day, and you say to me, okay, you've got 45 and 50 minutes, shape your story for me. And yeah, I tell a story. It's really intimate and really primal, I think.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I love that connection. Yeah, as you were saying that, Claire, that actually the thought that was coming up for me is when you were talking about us not having protection when we were born, my first thought was, and this is why we are meant to be a tribal community, and this is why we are meant to live in a village, because the protection ideally comes from that community, and that's right. What's so grievously missing. And what we hope to create in some sense at Fox and Feather, that we can be a shelter, we cannot replace, of course, an entire village, but we can deeply listen and create some sense of psychological shelter, spiritual shelter for you as you do the deep and incredible, vulnerable work of healing.
Yeah, I would imagine there's no way to do that without making yourself more vulnerable, right? You have to open up some of those things and share them in your storytelling to you three. Rachel, what would you ask me, or what would you be looking for me to tell you on that first meeting?
I do a similar like narrative approach, and I will say yes, with working with, younger kids or adolescents, I do a little bit of the get to know you. So it kind of is sharing more about their hobbies and interests, because sometimes, you may not feel fully ready in that first session. And so by starting with the interests, the hobbies, it leads into those discussions a bit more naturally. And then we're unfolding. And I'm saying, oh, so I've gotten like a little peek into this. So tell me more about your story. And, sometimes your story is still unfolding in our, future sessions too. So it's okay if we get to like rewrite it or reword it. Like this is just to hear it aloud or let the art do it aloud. So like my first session is a little like intro of art therapy, because a lot of times it is like this new topic for my clients and even their parents to kind of hear this new perspective outside of the traditional talk.
So tell me about that. What sort of materials am I looking at? I'm such an overly organized person. What's the goal? What do you want me to do? Tell me what to do so I can do it and you can praise me for it.
Well, definitely, especially when we're in person, the clients walk into all these art materials. So they see the markers, the oil pastels, the paints, the fabrics, our sewing machine, our canvas that's set up. So a lot of the times it's inspiration. I don't always go in and say you have to use these materials in session. Sometimes it's allowing them to kind of be drawn to it. Because art therapy is sometimes not knowing. Like if I'm looking at my markers and I'm like, I keep staring at the purple, I'll grab the purple and use it. I don't always need to be like, oh, I'm using purple because I want the dress to be purple or this animal to be purple. It kind of emerges. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I also love how when the art's on display, or even if we're in a virtual session, I encourage my clients to like set up the materials, be with it, set up that environment where the curiosity can bloom more.
Yeah, curiosity is probably one of the most important characteristics in art therapy. I love that Rachel said that, because it really is about coming in and allowing yourself to be curious and allowing that exploration without having an attachment to what your end product is going to look like in art therapy. I was thinking too, Claire, as you describe your personality a bit more, something that's I think is really interesting for a lot of people to know is that all art materials fall on what's called the expressive therapies continuum. So you've got your most controllable materials on one end, markers, colored pencils, that sort of thing. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have very loose materials like watercolors, acrylic paint, so on and so forth. So if somebody comes in, right, and again, working with a lot of clients with eating disorders, I see a lot of rigidity and a lot of high control. So I might challenge that in my client and say, so you're feeling like really rigid and I need this so much control over my meal plan. We're going to work with watercolors today because you cannot control water. We have an understanding different materials elicit different sensations in the body as well. So part of our training is understanding that for somebody who comes in and says to me, I feel like my life is completely out of control, I'm not going to give that person watercolors.
Here's a way to, in this space, to be in control of what you're doing. Yeah. And then I'm assuming that as I'm doing this, as I choose, let's go colored pencils. So I'm sitting there and I'm working with colored pencils, and I'm assuming that as we're talking, I'm paying attention to my body. I'm paying attention to my breathing. Or are we just talking as I'm arting? Can that be a verb? Can I be arting?
We'll make up words here.
We use it as a verb. Yeah, I think that's a great question. It can present really differently from session to session, but typically when I have clients engaged in art making, we aren't really talking during that period. It allows the client to really sort of settle into we like to call it a flow state, right? It allows them to kind of drop in to their creative process, be focused on what it is they're making, what they're feeling, right? Being present in their body. And then after 30, 45 minutes, sort of depending on the amount of time in session, we'll sort of find a good place to stop. They don't have to necessarily be finished with their art making, but we find a good stopping point, and we'll move into more of a processing of what was coming up for you with this experience. Where do you see yourself in this painting? What's going on? How does this relate to sort of the check-in that we had when we first came into session? So typically, there's not a lot of talk during an art therapy session. It would be sort of check-in before, processing after, and like a closing.
Is there music going on while I'm arting?
Some people like music, some people like silence, just sort of depends on the client and a preference. And sometimes you might challenge a client who's always wanting music. Let's try to make it in silence today and see how that feels. Depending on the reason why they're always wanting music.
A lot of what you were describing in terms of the people that come to you, it sounds like you need to be pretty well trauma informed if you're working with eating disorders. And I know the queer community is a big part of your base, and so the notion of this being whatever form it takes in a given session, the notion that this is trauma-informed practices is really important. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would argue that any therapist today needs to be deeply trauma-informed, because I have clients sometimes that I've been working with for years. I actually have quite a few clients that have been with me since 2017. And I'll be amazed at a story that will come out, and I am the one deeply witnessing and saying, that was abuse. The way that I'm watching your breathing pattern, you are responding in such a way that would show me that your body has stored this experience as a traumatic event. So yes, it is really our job, and something that we really work so hard on, and it's being so deeply attuned to our clients that we can be this container, we can be this holding space as feelings arise, sometimes memories arise for the very first time in a session with a client, something abusive or traumatic that they had not previously recalled, that now the psyche knows I'm in a safe place where I can release these images to you. And we have to have an understanding. First and foremost, for me, it's such an honor that clients come to us and feel so safe to do this work with us. And then, yes, we need to have an understanding. How do you move through that moment with a client? How do we be the safe container? How do we redirect some of this? It's like an energetic overload, I think, that can happen. How do we redirect that into the art making? And then what becomes so important over time too is that, a canvas can hold our pain. And I've seen quite a bit of pain come out in the art making. And then what we want to really invite our clients to do is, while I can see that the frog in your painting is bleeding, what does he need? What is he asking for? How can we help him? And then the art is a really safe place to practice nurturing, tending, sheathing. And if we can have an understanding energetically of how to practice these things in our artwork, then we help clients understand, I just witnessed you deeply care for this creature in your artwork. How can you do that outside of session? How can you do that when you sit down with your plate of food and it feels like you just can't eat anything? How can you bring that energy of nurturing into your recovery outside of the therapy session?
Yeah, bridges this gap between metaphor and reality, right? If we can allow somebody to, like Sarah said, care for this image, whatever is in this image, it builds a skill, right? It's the beginning of a skill building. And how do we then transfer that to to this person in reality, in their life, right? How do you take this skill that you can do for something else and do it for you?
Sometimes too, it's challenging those thought beliefs that they've had for a little bit, and that could be hard to see it for the first time. So, sometimes the process and the way the body is responding is that first signal that comes up. So I do always kind of appreciate how the art does it, and it's not always a conscious thing, right? They're not realizing, like, they may be holding their marker more tensely or going slower, quicker with their movements. There's a lot more with the body response than is always seen in the moment. So it can be nice for them to have like those light bulb moments of like, oh, yes, my body does respond this way when I'm thinking like this. And they begin to gain that insight to use those skills to apply it into the week.
Hi, folks. It's Clare with 5 reasons you should support Transqat with your donation or a sponsorship. Number 5. Our company jet can't use the cheap fuel. Number 4, every time you listen but don't donate, a chipmunk tries heroin. Number 3, Transqat will never start a war in the Middle East. Number 2, the owls are not what they seem. And the number 1 reason you should support Transqat. If you don't, my cat Newt will come to your house and yak on your carpet.
Couple of years back, I had a therapist on from the New Haven area, and he was very focused on that EMDR, where as you're processing trauma, you're paying very close attention to what's happening in your body, with the idea that the body stores trauma.
Yeah, the kinesthetic component is what we're speaking to, and it's key. I'm not EMDR trained. The 3 of us are not. We have somebody on staff who is, and something very similar to EMDR that we practice sometimes is called bilateral drawing. So essentially, when we have a traumatic experience, Jung called it a complex. The brain would store this compact amount of emotional energy and sort of separate it in the brain if the body was not in a place to process that intense condensing of emotional energy. And what happens is if I were to ask you, what did you have for breakfast? That piece of information gets stored, and there's a connection between the right and the left hemisphere of the brain. And because those pathways are open and flowing, what I had for breakfast gets successfully stored back in my filing system. But when we experience something traumatic and that cluster is stuck, there's not a successful pathway between both hemispheres. So in artwork, in bilateral drawing, which is essentially taking a really big piece of paper, it technically could be any size, but the bigger the better, having a drawing material in each hand and performing repetitive motions. So I'm motioning big circles with my hands right now. And so we're using, let's say, purple markers to create these big circles, and we are engaging both hemispheres of our brain. And so for traumatic material, it invites a connection where there once was not. And that is really key in trauma recovery.
That flow state that somebody was referencing a little earlier, that's something that I've, in the last couple of years, been paying more attention to. I can never pronounce the guy's name. It's this long Polish name. But I love the idea. I found during COVID that jigsaw puzzles do that for me. I will start out being my usual linear analytical self, like, okay, yep, we're going to do the border first, and then we're going to do this. And at a certain point, I'm gone, and I'm just doing, I'm just performing, I'm just being. And I love that. I can get that from reading. I get that from jigsaw puzzles. I used to be a marathon runner, and distance running used to do that for me, where at a certain point, I just disappeared into the activity. And it sounds like maybe this is similar.
Yeah, I think that art making inherently allows for this sort of drop into the flow state for people, whether they consider themselves an artist or not, whether they consider themselves creative or not. If they can allow themselves to be curious, as Rachel and Sarah were saying before, it creates an opening, right, where you can drop in and really engage with the art making and self-exploration to find things out about yourself, right? That maybe you didn't know. Hi, kitty.
We are joined by Newt, who is the CEO of Transqat Enterprises.
Oh, hello, Newt.
Oh, my boy. He is not in a place where he can talk about his trauma right now. So I'm just going to respect that and let him go nap.
When he's ready, we're here.
Yeah, so that sort of flow state allows you to access things or be, in a place. One of the things, though, that I don't know if you encounter this, but people who are maybe anxious is the wrong word, but insecure about their ability to do art, or feel like, oh man, you're putting me on the spot here. I don't know how to, I can't draw. How do you ease people into that?
We're pretty skilled at working through that.
Right, professionals.
Yeah. It's so common because almost everybody has that story of my third grade art teacher who told me my drawing wasn't very good, or the neighbor in fifth grade who made fun of my self-portrait, right? Everybody's got this story of when they were told that their art was bad, which photorealism is just one shade of art, right? But for some reason that seems to be the stigma. Good art is photorealism. Anyways, we're very familiar with that anxiety and that insecurity that can arise, particularly in the very beginning of somebody's art therapy journey. And I have a few ways around that, and I'm sure Katie and Rachel do too. Sometimes I'll just make art alongside the client. We can name yeah, this is uncomfortable, this is new. Maybe you haven't used oil pastels ever, or maybe not since that time in third grade. And let's name it, and let's carry on anyway. Let's do it. And I'm thinking of a scribble drawing, which Katie, I feel like maybe you utilize that a little bit more too. Maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, a scribble drawing is a technique where I give a client usually a bigger piece of paper, but 8.5 by 11 is maybe the smallest I'll go. One art material and one color. Close your eyes. You cannot close your eyes, but don't look at the paper. And you just sort of circle around and make a big scribble, like move your arm, move your body, and maybe for 15 seconds. And then you pull off your pencil or your drawing material and you're left with this big scribble. And I have clients just sort of turn their paper around, look at it from all angles, all orientations. What do you see? Right? Like usually we can find, oh, that looks like a face. That looks like a cat. That looks like a person, right? And it's like, let's pull that out and let's make it what you see. And it allows people to be a little bit more playful, allows people to draw outside the lines, right? Where I'm like, let's take, like, we don't have to follow these lines exactly, right? Like we can move outside of them. So I try to engage in a little bit of playfulness with my clients who are a little bit nervous or insecure, where it's like, we're just going to mess around, right? Let's pick a material that interests you, right? Like, what does this do? And let's just play with it and see what happens. Takes the pressure off. We don't have to make anything. It's just sort of getting an introduction to a material and getting comfortable.
So you're saying that there might be a lesson for queer people in being told it's okay to draw outside the lines?
Yes. Yep. We don't stay inside the lines. So you're free to do whatever you want in this session.
Wow.
Yes.
I think a lot of times I reference saying, I'm not an art teacher, so I'm not here to critique your artistic abilities. If you showed me, a stick figure and said, this is my tree, I'm like, great, tell me more about this tree, because they're there to name, what the images mean. because there are a lot of symbols out there too. And I feel like a lot of times there's assumptions to it. Like we think of a color red, sometimes we think of either love or anger, right?
Yep.
Those are the typical. Though to someone, it can be anxiety, it can be worry. So I like too how the flow state allows them to kind of be in that place to name it.
On your website, two things that I wouldn't necessarily assume went along with the sort of work that you're describing, but but both are mentioned throughout your site, is spirituality and magic. And I'll put myself in that curious space. I want to know about that. Tell me about the spiritual aspect of what you're doing. Tell me about the magic that can happen. And that's magic with a K, right?
Yes. So those things might be one and the same for some people. I may be one of those people. When I feel magical, I feel very close to my spiritual connection. We have a lot of clients that will come to us. They've done talk therapy, they've done higher level of care, they've done DBT and CBT, and they're saying something's just missing. And what I found in my own recovery journey is that connecting to something bigger than the self is this missing component that is so essential. In our culture, we are very individualized and we are obviously living in a consumeristic society. We are told that we are only worthy if we're being productive. And so spirituality is really something totally opposite that and saying, I have so many guides that surround me. There's a force that is much bigger than me that is guiding me and that I can connect to when I am looking for wisdom on my recovery journey. And that it looks different for everybody. For some folks, it is a religion. For other folks, it's nature. For some people, it's creating art. For others, it's connecting with different goddesses. We do a lot of work with connecting clients to the wheel of the year. So right now, we are in the season of hibernation and dreamland. This is not a time to be taking action. This is actually not a time to be creating vision boards and saying, this is who I'm going to be this year, and these are the action steps I'm supposed to take. Really, this time of year is all about doing whatever you do, whatever your practice is, to get into a deeply listening state. For me, again, that's the art making. So spirituality, again, is really anything that is bigger than the self. And if we can connect our story, so I grew up with Disney, right? I'm a Disney girl all the way. That connecting my story to Ariel, I could see part of my story in a fairy tale or in a myth. And that's part of what art making can do too, is open up to these archetypal energies that come through. That's very spiritual. And when I think of magic, well, what is magic? Magic with a K, right? So magic just with a C is parlor tricks, right? Or going to see a magician on stage. Magic with a K is much older and connects very much to goddess tradition, which is really all about connecting to Mother Earth. And when we think about magic, when we think about witches, when we think about putting elements into a cauldron, we're taking these seemingly different elements, combining them to create some sort of desired outcome, right? That's magic. And that's really what art therapy is. Clients are bringing in the energy of their wounds. We're combining it with the energy of witnessing, the energy of creativity. And when you leave that session, you are very different, even after 1 hour. That is magic. I mean, again, for clients, some of these clients that I've worked with for years have come to me and said, I don't believe recovery is possible for me. These are clients that might have medical complications because of their eating disorder. They're unable to have any meaningful relationships or keep a job because their PTSD symptoms are so severe. And when I look at these clients living successful, joyful lives, I'm like, that is magic. That is magic to me. And I think I really deeply feel a lot of our clients connect with that metaphor as well.
Well, magic, that spelling of it is all about transmutation, right? It's about taking this and turning it into that.
Alchemy, emotional alchemy.
Alchemy, that's, yeah.
especially working, with teenagers and, they're still exploring, like some of them, it's the family's religion, the family's spirituality. So they're still in that stages of exploration that, it's nice to see not only the artwork, but for them to look up, to research, to say, oh, I'm curious about this. And that's something when I work with families too, it is about like the relational supports that come in, because I don't know, we're human. Unless someone can see the future, like we don't know what decision's the right or wrong, right? It's part of our journey, part of our narrative there. And so when we focus on that relational support, it's showing like, all right, I'm here for you to explore this. Like you're allowed to say like, oh, I'm curious about, Wiccan. I'm curious about, Catholic. And I think too, that sometimes can be hard because I see it sometimes with parents that they want to have the answers. And if they don't know with like 100% certainty, sometimes that scares them that they don't have those answers. And it can be portrayed in many different ways, very different family dynamics. So that relational part, I feel like is where that art magic comes in. Like the adolescent can say, here's my artwork I made in session today, and let it speak, let it be witnessed by them. And I feel like too, like that's such like a special moment when the adolescent does choose to say, I'm going to show my artwork to my parents.
Yeah. Yeah, to make that, Sarah, you were talking about the connection between the brain hemispheres, but that connection between that safe space in that room and the outside world where maybe it's not quite as safe, that decision to, yeah, I'm gonna turn that synapse on now.
That's a great connection because it's very true, and it can start there, right? Like that's, Sarah talks about this time is about hibernation, and the next stage in the wheel is about the seeds and planting, and this allows them space to plant that seed in the home environment, to maybe then plant it in the school, to plant it out out and about in other social settings too, to see how does it feel to be in this place and talk like this, to be like this.
That's so interesting about the wheel that you're talking about, that because the world of capitalism that we live in insists that January is the time to be renewing that gym membership and making plans for how you're going to improve yourself during the year and what you're going to spend money on in order to do that, and that maybe nature isn't in line with that.
Nature is not. You might be receiving messages, oh, there is a new kind of movement that is interesting to my body that I would like to try. It doesn't mean I'm going to go and do it right now, but because, if we can allow winter to be that space where we're being curious, again, that's when that wisdom starts to really come through. And then in February 1st is when Imbolc is celebrated, which translates to in the belly. That is when seeds start stirring inside Mother Earth. We don't see them with our eyes, but energetically there is motion. And that's when maybe just in the beginning of February, we're starting to put words to, I want to go back to ballet, or I really am interested in starting to crochet, or whatever the thing might be.
Right. That is fascinating. That if we were more in tune with the earth, it puts things like seasonal affective disorder, which I know I have to a degree, it puts that in a different context. It's like, well, maybe this isn't so much a problem as your body's trying to tell you, here's what we should be doing right now.
That's exactly correct. Exactly correct. If you feel tired and you feel like you just want to rest more, yes. This is what all the animals are doing. This is what we're meant to be doing too. And of course, figuring out, well, how do I do that and still have a job and pay my bills and make my responsibilities, right? There is some compromise, that we are a part of these systems that we don't totally agree with, but we also cannot completely divorce. So what we can look at is, well, where in our life can we have some agency? Where can we start to connect a little bit more deeply with the rhythms of nature. And I find, and Katie and Rachel, maybe you can speak to this too, but it really does wonders for clients' eating disorder symptoms. It's this, it helps us really regulate our own internal rhythms when we are paying much deeper attention to Earth's rhythms.
I was just going to say there's such sort of a dysregulation within your body when you aren't paying attention or don't know about sort of the seasons that the earth goes through, that the earth moves through. And right, you feel like you're kind of in competition or like combating something that you're not actually supposed to, right? Like you kind of want to fall in line with it, and it makes things a little bit easier to navigate, right? Not everything's going to disappear. And like Sarah said, you know, we do have to navigate the world in which we live and the systems that we are a part of in order to, you know, I don't know, function. But where are the small pockets where I can be in line with what Mother Earth is telling me and follow kind of the practice of the year and what season am I in, and what can I be doing that actually feels good for myself and my body to lessen that sort of dysregulation or rupture.
Yeah. Cognitive dissonance was the word that I was thinking of, where, yeah, that you're getting one message here and one message here, and you're sort of being smushed.
Right. It's like, which one am I supposed to do, and how do I do both? And that's the compromise.
Dear mortgage company, I will not be paying my bill this month because it's
for the winter season.
And if you pay attention to nature, you'll understand why you're not getting a check until March. So back off.
I think if we all did that, it might work.
We could all be homeless together. And there again, see, as a community, we would take care of each other.
Exactly.
Village.
This is fascinating stuff, but I'm looking at the clock, and we are actually closing in on an hour already. I wanted to be sure to ask you about the name. Sarah, we kind of started by talking about the fox, but maybe each of you on what those two symbols, because we're talking about a lot of symbology. You put up the comparison of Catholicism and Wicca, and they're both heavily symbolic things. So tell me about the fox and the feather as it relates to what you guys do.
Foxes have always been an ally for me since I was very, very young. And the practice name came to me before I fully had words for why Fox and Feather wanted to be named Fox and Feather. Foxes are master observers. So foxes in nature, they hide in the undergrowth, they observe patterns in their environment before choosing to act. And so we really do that as therapists. We observe our clients and we reflect their patterns back to them to help them develop a sense of awareness, because when we are aware, then we are empowered to make different choices for ourselves. You cannot decide where you want to go if you don't know where you are. So that's fox medicine to me, is being able again to reflect patterns back to our clients, being a sacred mirror, so to speak. Feathers are one of the only elements that touch sky and earth. So feathers really symbolize the spiritual connection that we lean so deeply into in the practice. And they just really wanted to be together in this beautiful unity and symbolism of the work that we do. And the other thing I'll add, and then I know Rachel and Katie will add to this as well, is that I will go a step further with feather and say that feather also symbolizes crow medicine in the practice. Crows have the ability to move through timelines. So when we are healing in the here and now, healing energy is also going back to our wounded inner child and healing that version of the self. And when we are healing in the here and now, you are also healing a future version of yourself. So that's really important to name too. And if you want to get into ancestral healing, when we do the work, we are doing the work for 7 generations behind and 7 generations ahead. And crow medicine will help carry that healing energy through all of these generations and timelines.
Well, certainly we know a lot about generational trauma When I became a parent, I swore I was going to do better than my parents, and I don't know that I achieved that. But there are things that we pass on that we don't mean to, and so that notion of crow medicine and being able to move through timelines, that makes sense to me.
And Claire, I'm sure that you have done wonderful things as a parent too, maybe more so than you realize.
Let's hope so. Part of this, Sarah, is me looking at that artwork behind you, but also just listening to the three of you talk. My experience of being closeted, which lasted more than half a century, but my experience of the world was gray. That was, if you asked me to sort of describe what the world was like, it's kind of like a day like this. The sky is overcast. There's very little color. Um, and the notion of what if my younger self had been told, here, work with color as a way to express, what you're missing in your life. And just not entirely sure what I'm trying to say here, except that I'm making a connection with what you folks are talking about. And as somebody who was closeted for way too long, I can see the value in what you're doing.
It's a beautiful sentiment, Claire. Yeah, we didn't even really get to talking about our work with the queer community. This hour flew by. We'll plan another episode for that.
Yes.
But what you're speaking to, Claire, is exactly what our greatest hopes are, is that someone like young Claire, who felt like my world is colorless, that they would have a space to come and explore color.
Well, the first time you and I met, Sarah, was at Guilford Pride, and you came up to the Transqat tent wearing the most gorgeous, elegant, feathered mask, and and I immediately that was the connection I made. Is okay, here's somebody for whom color and creativity and life is clearly important. I want to know more about that.
Yeah, those are my fox ears with the
Yeah.
feathers. Yep. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you can tell just by looking at my office, color and expression is so important. And my story is different than yours and similar in some ways in that I was not able to be fully expressive as a child. So I'm more than making up for it as an adult.
I want to have you tell folks how to get in touch with you again. The website, the phone number you said that they should call. And then I want to leave the last words to you. So I think what I'm going to ask you to think about while we're giving the information stuff is a sales pitch. Who are you talking to when you say Fox and Feather offers these services, and what do you want them to know? Because we started before the cameras rolling talking about this. The last few weeks, the last few years have just been unbelievably stressful. And I think we all sort of feel like we're walking around with a degree of PTSD just from watching what's going on in Minnesota right now. They're all of the bad things, anger and helplessness and fear. So for people who might be feeling that and would benefit from your services, I want you to tell them something.
Okay, so there's a couple ways that you can find us and get in touch with us. The first would be our website, which is foxfeatherhealingarts.com. And when you come to the site, there's a place to sign up for our weekly newsletter, and there's lots of weekly goodies that come out, different recommendations on art supplies or a seasonal ritual that you might be able to perform. Another place would be our Instagram, and our handle is at fox_and_feather. And if you wanted to give us a call to schedule an intake, you could do that at 860-575-4500. So there's a fabulous psychologist. His name is Francis Weller, and he talks about this concept called the long dark. And as a humanity, we are descending into the long dark, and we are grappling with unprocessed history that is repeating itself. And we see this on the individual level. We are learning how to process traumas within the self and our own storyline, and we are figuring out how to do that as a humanity. And so if you are someone who feels alone, who feels broken, who feels isolated, who has experienced trauma, who struggles in their relationship with food, if you are looking for a place to explore and be curious and be deeply held and witnessed, we may be just the place for you to do that.
My simple answer to this is, if you're a person that's looking for a safe space to be yourself, explore who yourself is, find yourself, then we could be a good fit for you.
I will say the first thing that did come to mind was the witnessing. I feel like it's such a powerful piece in especially art therapy. And if you want to be witnessed in a different way, in a different perspective, or for you to explore it too, I think all the kinds of art materials or creative expressions, can be a place for you to explore. So if you're curious, come on down.
If you enjoyed today's show, and I hope you did, check out other mental health-related episodes. Episode 18, with Stefan Simonovich, is the episode that I referenced in which EMDR was discussed. Episode 82 was with the good people of Prism Counseling, and episode 97 was with Dr. Nicholas Mead of Yale School of Medicine. If you're listening from here in Connecticut, I hope to see you at Middletown Pride on Saturday, June 6. 4 Arrows, my debut novel and the opening chapter of the Heart of the Fire series, is on its way into the world. The Kindle version is listed on Amazon now for $5.99 and has a May 26 release date. Search for Clare, C-L-A-R-E, Rebecca McCarthy, to disambiguate, as they say on Wikipedia, from similarly named authors. Next up, well, it kind of depends. It might be an inspiring conversation with Aaliyah Hayes, a fitness coach, trans man, and founder of Mask Fit Lab. Or it might be a discussion with my friends from Guilford CT about the trans and non-binary offerings at this year's festival, which runs from June 12 to the 20th at Cinestudio on the campus of Trinity College in Hartford. You can go to outfilmct.org for more information and to get some tickets. This has been Transqat. I'm Clare McCarthy. Thank you for listening, and let's talk soon.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies.
Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
Or ask Claire a question?
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.